Hello, everyone. Welcome to this video series on getting started with Java, or Introduction to the Java language. This will be the first of 5 videos in this series. And how this is broken up is that there will be a video for each learning objective. And so this video here will focus on explaining the necessary components needed to download, run, and execute a Java program. And then the subsequent videos will focus on the remaining bullet points here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So just for context, what is Java? It's an object-oriented programming language. And so what we're going to do is we're going to start off with understanding some of the basics of the Java language, and then we're going to understand the full essence of how to use Java in an object-oriented manner. Whenever you download any particular language, typically it comes with some pre-written code from whoever created the language. And that's called the standard class library. And we need that code because it gives us some basic functionality to start working immediately within the program. And so one of the applications you're going to see me create is called a console application. But in order to create that console application, I need some basic starter code. And a lot of times that code comes in the form of what we call the library. So whether it's Java, C#, C++, whenever you download a language, you typically are going to also download some additional code that is already pre-written for you. And so that's a little bit more context on the standard class library. You're going to get some practice with that in later videos. The other big component of getting started with Java is we're going to need something called the JVM. And this is big to help us understand how code that we write actually gets translated into the computer. And that's the job of the JVM. We're going to write code in the language that this person here, James Gosselin, wrote. We're going to write that in a text file, and then we're going to compile that code into what they call bytecode. And that bytecode is going to get translated into what we call machine code. It gets translated into the zeros and ones, binary. And so just a little bit of context, and like I said, if this doesn't make a lot of sense, we'll dive deeper into explaining these concepts here. You're going to see an example of how we can actually compile our program into bytecode, and that's what's going to be used by the computer to interpret or run our program. So before we move on, let me make mention here, we talked about the standard class library, but here is the actual link to the Java 11 API documentation. So if you click on this, it'll take you to a site where you can actually look at all of the pre-written code that's given to us to begin to develop a variety of different applications. If you were to change this, or let's just actually click here to API documentation. If you want to look at a different version, let's say 18, you can look at version 18 by just changing that in the URL, and it'll take you to 18. But in this class, we'll be using version 11. And we'll dig more into this code here in later videos, but just wanted to show you where that's located, and you can access it here by just click on this link, or you can just Google Java API documentation, and it'll take you to a link. Just make sure that you want to choose the right version. So the next thing I want to talk about here is this concept of write once, run anywhere. This is what made Java popular. So no matter what operating system you're using, whether it's Mac or whether it's Windows or Linux, the Java virtual machine it's a virtual machine that allows us to basically compile our program on any particular operating system. And it's going to do the heavy lifting to take the bytecode and translate it into machine code on our behalf. And so it's really extensible in that sense. And so, and again, because of that versatility to basically run the programs on any operating system, that really catapulted Java as one of the #1 languages in the world. So the question is, what is needed to run Java? So there's a couple things we're going to need. So we already talked about one of the essential things that we need is going to be the JDK, the Java Development Kit. That's what we download into our machine. That's going to allow us to execute our program. But the other thing that we're going to need is we're going to need some type of editor. And one of my web development classes here, I have a slide that kind of briefly talks about the difference between a text editor and a integrated development environment. That's what IDE stands for. And so when we develop our applications, we're going to use one of the other. So in this class, we'll be using something called Visual Studio Code. But just know that a lot of Java developers enjoy writing their code in something called IntelliJ. And then one of the more earlier popular editor IDEs was Eclipse. But really, you can write Java in all of these, whether it's a text editor or IDE. An IDE gives you a little bit more support in terms of a little bit of code help, IntelliSense, and it also it's a little bit more powerful than a text editor. And a lot of times, the integrated development environment is geared towards a specific language, and so, like in the case of Eclipse and IntelliJ, they're geared towards the Java language, but that doesn't mean that they're exclusive to the Java language. So let's take a look at how to install Visual Studio Code. The cool thing here is that if we go back to our PowerPoint slides, Visual Studio Code has put together a really simplified process of actually installing the JDK along with the text editor. And so if you click on this link here, tutorial to install JDK with VS Code text editor, I'm going to click on that and open in a different tab. I would say read through this page here, but let's skip down here to install Visual Studio Code for Java. And this is a really slick, cool way to get Java installed quickly on your machine. So whether it's Mac, OS, or Windows, you can click on Install the Coding Pack for Java. And what this is going to do is that it's going to install the JDK, it's going to install VS Code, and it's going to install the Java extensions you will need. And these Java extensions are the extensions like that will be useful to you in terms of writing code. And we'll take a look at that a little bit later. So if you click on this, install code in Java for coding pack for Java, it's going to click on this exe file, the executable file. All right, so I pause the video just to make sure that I didn't waste any precious video time to watch that download. So that's now downloaded, and I'm going to click on that exe file. And you would just walk through the process of installing Visual Studio Code and as well as installing the JDK. I'm not going to go through the process here, but I'll click on the next button and it'll show you what's going to be installed, and you just press install, and you should have everything you need to begin coding in Java. Now, what you may want to do is actually restart your computer before you reopen the text editor. So when you open the text editor, it's going to look like something like this, but I would say pause this video and then restart your computer, and then we can then come back to this particular position in the video, and then let's start again. All right, so once you've installed, restarted your computer, what you want to do is now click on your editor, and that icon, if you clicked on icon for your desktop, it may be an icon on your desktop. You can just click on and go to this editor, or you can just type in VS Code, and it'll be the first one that pops up here. So you can click on VS Code. It's going to take you to that editor that looks like this. Now, mine may look slightly different depending on what version of VS Code you have versus the one I have. But if you, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. But you'll see that there's a few different icons to the left here. One is the extensions. These are the extensions that you can download, and there's some helpful tools to the developer. But the one that I want to focus on in this video is this first icon here called the Explorer. So if you went through the process of actually installing Java and using that tutorial, that walkthrough from the link within the PowerPoint slides, you should have everything you need to download to basically start a program. So if you click on this here, this is expand this view of the Explorer window, and you can quickly create a Java project. You can say open a Java project or create Java project, and we're not going to use any build tools. Later in the course, we'll talk about build tools. One is Gradle and one is Maven, but at this point, let's just say no build tools. You're going to choose a folder. I'm going to just create this one on my desktop, and I'll just say sample app, or let's say sample Java app, and I'll just say select the project location. Oops. Oh, actually, let's do this. Let's create a new folder. Whenever you create a project, create a new folder, and then we'll say sample. Oh, let's call it Java app. And we'll just click on that. Asking for a Java project name, and we'll just say enter. So here, we'll say yes, trust the authors here. Then you have your source. You're going to have app.java, and then you have some other files here that basically gives instruction to VS Code, and then your library of code, your library that's going to be dependent upon your project. Don't worry about the lib folder at this point. More so focus on the source folder. That's going to contain your source code. So if you click on java.api, the app.java, you will see some code here. And it's a really basic program at this point. One of the things here is you just want to execute this program and see how it runs. You can just press play. You'll say allow access, and you'll see that it brings up the terminal window, and you'll see hello world. Now, again, the whole installation process was essentially just going to this web page from the website, from the PowerPoint presentation. So right-clicking, open, and new tab, and then going down here, whether you have Mac OS or Windows, and that's going to install the JDK, the editor, as well as some extensions that can be used within Visual Studio Code. Now, in the next video, I'm going to talk about how to compile and run your program, and we just did that pretty quickly here, where we created a project and we pressed this play button, and it showed us how we can actually run and execute a program. So we compiled it into bytecode, and then it basically took the bytecode, put it into machine code, and then the machine allowed us to render hello world, which is where my mouse is hovering currently. I'm going to show you a different way, but if you look in the bin file, it created this app.class, and this app.class is actually the bytecode. You can't see anything here, but that's going to be the class file that actually gets that is going to use to basically translate this into machine code. What I mean by that is the JVM, or the Java Virtual Machine, is going to take this app.class file, convert it into machine code, and that's what's going to allow our computer to interpret the Java code that we've coded out. Now, we didn't do much coding here. This was already given to us, but in the next video we'll talk about this code here. So no worries if this doesn't make any sense at this point, but I just wanted to show you how to quickly download and install the JDK, as well as how to quickly run our program. Before I end this video, let's look right back at the slide, and this here just shows you what just happened, right? So we have our source file, which is the .java file, which is this file here, the app.java file that contains the code, right? And then when we press this play button, it compiles it. It compiles it into bytecode, and our bytecode is contained inside of the app.class file. And then the JVM, or the Java Virtual Machine, it does the heavy work of taking what's the bytecode in this class file and turning it into machine code. And then that's kind of just a visual of what's happening behind the scenes when you press that play button. All right, so in our next video, we're going to talk about a basic program. I'm going to quickly show you another way of compiling your program using one of the development tools that comes along with the JDK. Take care.